Second quote, I quote, Matheson came out swinging on the Cooper site issue, calling out the former owner for tying the issue up in court. End quote.
Again, it should be obvious that Mayor Matheson was not telling it like it is. Everyone knows that in 2002, Mayor Matheson and the council of the day gave instructions to sue me, saying that I didn't own the parking lot where the university presently sits. That lawsuit was started in 2002, and it was over the ownership of that 2.5-acre piece. Since that time, the council then commenced the expropriation, which, while is only a valuation hearing, is dealt with as litigation following the same rules. The expropriation wasn't started by me, it was started by Dan. Since that time, the council has given instructions, and we've received correspondence from their lawyers refusing to hand over their documents to us and refusing to follow through with the requirement to provide and to agree on a procedural order. That procedural order is to be done for the sole purpose of setting a schedule, to have the hearing, to figure out how much should be paid, not just for the market value of the property taken, but also for the damages. And as everyone here may have some knowledge of that, Wendy and I were on that site for almost 17 years, and there was a lot of money spent each year trying to deal with the project that was approved back in 1995 and to get it up and running. Now, one of the reasons the council is refusing to go to the OMB and to produce their documents is they now, after a year and a half of agreeing to hand over those documents, have written us a letter saying that they want to go to the Superior Court first to figure out who owns the parking lot that the university building sits on. Now, they've been to the OMB twice with this argument. They lost both times. They're taking a third stab at it, and we don't know why, other than to delay what we think is the inevitable. As far as the fire claim, which is the one claim I did make, following the fire there was damages. I agreed to put that on hold at the request of the city because they say that those damages will be covered under the expropriation at the OMB. I don't agree with them, but I did agree that I would put it on hold so we could get to the OMB quicker, and if they say they'll cover the damages, obviously we don't need to be in two courts. The POA files or appeals were also put on hold for the same reason. And one outstanding litigation that the council still has is their appeal of the Carroll fire order, and David Carroll is the chief building official. You may recall after the fire he sued us for $160,000 for monies the city said they spent dealing with that fire. And those monies were spent on engineering, environmental, and security. Well, what happened at the end of a 21-day trial is Justice Granger ruled against the city and said you're not going to get any money. And then, of course, they're not going to get any cost. So the city appealed that a few years ago, but they have yet to perfect that appeal.
And during that time, the city's lawyers are charging for more costs?
Well, I'm pretty sure they haven't stopped charging.
Third quote, still from Dan Matheson. I quote, Matheson demanded, should the site's former owner have his own appraisal to bring it to court or the OMB and be done with it? Appraisal, Lawrence.
Sadly, what Dan would like, which he's never going to get, is he would like to turn this into a battle of the reports. My appraisal versus his appraisal. What he's overlooking is the Ontario Municipal Board does use appraisals, and the Act calls for the right to provide them. But we're going to start at the beginning. When the city first told Wendy and I that they wanted the site, we said no. What we said was, you don't have any money and you have no plan. So we see no way of getting paid. So it's not going to happen. What followed was we got an affidavit saying we want it for the University of Waterloo Stratford Institute. And you may remember I went up publicly and I said, okay, under these circumstances, while we don't agree, we're going to allow it to happen. And in part, that was because we thought that the university would lend some credibility to the whole situation. Along the way, there was an appraisal. After we gave the city the land, they produced an appraisal by Ray Bauer. Now, as part of the argument for possession, we provided them a copy of the appraisal that we had done in 2005, and this is inserted in the books which were given to the city and filed with the court. Now, this appraisal said what the vacancy was worth per acre for the undisputed land, not the parking lot. But interestingly, it said also there's a shop building on the land, and they included the Rylett report, which said that those shops were worth $18 million. Now, what follows from that, and some of the material that I put on the tables beside, is the Ray Bauer report agreed with that number. So technically, there's no issue over what its replacement cost is. What one has to then do is go to the Expropriations Act. And it says if you're relocating your project, you get replacement cost. So I don't need another appraisal to support what they've already agreed to. In addition to that, from the university files, when they were originally going to take 4 acres, they recorded in their business plan of the day that the value of the 4 acres was $4 million. Well, that was more than what we appraised it at with the Altus appraisal. In addition to that, there's the Simmons Group appraisal for the Erie Street parking lot, which is 2 blocks away. And they were sitting around the $850 an acre mark, and that land isn't as good as ours.
850,000.
Or 750,000. Now, what happens at the end of the day is, in order to get to the end number, the Act provides for both parties to provide final appraisals on anything that's still in dispute after you carry out your discoveries, which is each other asking, do you have any evidence to support the value you gave? Now, aside from the physical appraisals and the fact that they have more than one from us, there's 20,000 documents that don't just talk about a valuation. Not everybody here has to go and hire an appraiser to figure out what to pay for a house. You can compare other sites, you can put your own thoughts to it. And so we will go to discoveries and we will present that information in support. And if the city at the end of all of that says we still disagree on the environmental or the structural or the heritage and those values have to come out, then and only then will we hire a consultant to address those issues. Now, obviously they'll address anything we agree on. But the biggest part of this that's important for you to remember is this. You're paying for that appraisal, not me. The Expropriation Act makes it very clear when land is forcibly taken from an owner, all costs are covered, but it says reasonable cost. So it's important for me to make sure that the money that I spend on consultants is reasonable. It's not reasonable if they agree to a number in advance of ordering the report. So we set up this whole situation with the discoveries with the city so that we would have their answers under oath. And we would go through the existing appraisals and why I say the value is $25 million. Only after that will I then hire the appraiser and say, I can't resolve these issues, we're too far apart, do up the appraisal, but limit it to only what's in dispute so he's not spending forever and tens of thousands of dollars, which is precisely what it's going to cost. And that's a bill that you will ultimately bear at the end of the day.
So the city has agreed through the Bauer report, which is a city report, that the building is worth $18 million.
The replacement cost of the building is 18. They have not agreed. Their Bauer appraisal says that he would give it about 900,000 max because he's talking market value. Now, We have a difference of opinion on that. Through discoveries, we'll agree if Bauer is willing to shift from the 900,000 figure to the Rylett report, which actually had two values: the replacement cost, and then it had the contributory value. If anybody here does not understand what contributory value is, you would look at it like this. Today there's a 4-acre building standing, and every piece of material in it costs somebody some money. If I take it down and then go and put up a new building, the shell, I would have to buy new material. So by not having to do that, I can contribute to my equity by saving the cost of building that shell again, whether it looks different or not. So what Rylett did was they said you have a 10 million contributory value number and you have a replacement cost of 18. The city and I disagree on the contributory value. However, in the Expropriation Act, it isn't what the city says it contributes. I get paid for what I lost. And my evidence is clear. I was being able to utilize the full contributory value. And that's the number that you would be forced to pay at the end, provided the OMB, of course, agrees with the way I came up with that number and with the way Rylett did.
Yes. So the lowest appraisal is 500,000 an acre, and it goes to 850,000 per acre as well.
Well, that's true, but remember, that's a 2005 number, and the appraisers would say that from 2005 until 2009, when they took the land, that the land value also increased. So, and then that appraisal doesn't cover off the other 2.5 acres.
You talked about the expense of an appraisal. How much does a formal appraisal cost, Lawrence?
My understanding is that if I have to prove every component of the value of this site, that the appraisal will exceed over $100,000 and could reach as high as $250,000. And we would be permitted to bring in 2 appraisals coming at it from different angles in order to prove the point. One of the things we're trying, or I'm trying desperately to do, is to not have to order such an appraisal. And so we're trying to get the city to the table so that we can save those costs.
Next quote is a short one, still from Dan Matheson. We paid an amount of money we feel is legitimate.
I want to say this politely, but it might be difficult. So here's what we're going to do. When I refused, Wendy and I did, to hand over the property for the reason the city said, and they said we're going to give it to the university, and we changed our minds, we anticipated a fair offer. We were told they weren't going to try and play any games at this point because expropriation is very clear. What happened instead is we couldn't come to terms, so everybody asked us what we would accept as an interim payment. Now, that word interim means there's a recognition that that's all it is, but it goes beyond that. They paid that amount of money to get possession. Wendy and I had a $4.5 million mortgage on that property, not for the purpose of buying the property, but for covering off some of the costs thrown away in trying to get the site up and running and to get the services on and get the project built. Now, after we got the interim payment, or in order to finish with the minutes of settlement, because I had said I would take the $5 million that they were offering, you'll remember originally it was $500,000. Then what we did was we complained that their appraisal was nowhere near the reality. And on the way up to the courtroom steps, they said, okay, we'll give you the $5 million that you were seeking. And because it was being paid to Republic Mortgage, my mortgager, we signed a minutes of settlement that's posted on the city's website, and it says I agreed to have them write that check to them directly. Now, the city then, in the OMB hearing in their reply, want the OMB to give them that money back. They say because it wasn't paid for market value, it wasn't paid for the land, it was just paid to get possession. They did pay some money, $400,000 or $500,000 for interest, some legal cost, and relocation. But again, it was only a part payment. It had nothing to do with, let's see your bills. It was just a matter of, we'll consider that enough if you consider it enough so we can get possession and get on with the university. Our claim says that there is no money paid for the property itself, and under the Expropriations Act, the way this payment was made, it's clear that there has been no accounting in that regard, because the city was supposed to, with their payment, identify what the money was for, and they never did. Now, I know that some people have been asking me about the claims. Roger Black had said that Matheson said that there was no issue, that it's not before the courts, and Dan Matheson had suggested that if I just brought an appraisal and get this thing going, in other words, I'm sitting on my backside not doing anything. What he never told you is that they filed a reply. And they filed this on October the 4th, 2013. Now, I imagine he doesn't want everybody to know about this reply, because in it says there's no heritage value, the shops are useless, there's still a $20 million environmental problem. We also know that he spent a lot of your money for consultants to address those issues, and now all of that has gone out the window. So there is, you should say it not so much as it's litigation, it's simply a valuation hearing. And this is important. When you go into a civil action, you have to prove liability and the amount of damages. In expropriation, we don't have to prove liability. It's an automatic given. You took it, you owe for it. All we have to do is prove the damages.
Thank you.